Welcome to The Power of Now What, a podcast on overcoming the various challenges and problems that one encounters when on the spiritual path, when on a spiritual journey, when engaged in a practice or discipline such as meditation and even post-awakening and post-enlightenment. This is episode 15.5 on the subject of isn't this all just wishful thinking or toxic positivity? The reason it's episode 15.5 and not episode 17, which is what we should be on, is that this belongs in a subcategory of problems that exist when we begin to find our spiritual awakening and finding the present moment under the umbrella of the fear of going crazy or the fear of, isn't this just a delusion? How do I know that I'm not just becoming delusional? This is a problem that exists within that category of trying to understand, isn't this just me ignoring my problems? Isn't this finding the present moment? And let's remind ourselves right here, what's at stake? When we awaken and become enlightened, we are truly embodying and experiencing the recognition that there is no future. There is no such thing as the next moment. The future is not a place that is going to arrive at some time. It is simply a fabrication of the mind. So too, there is no past. There is no such thing. It has been and gone. Whatever this thing called the past is, can only exist now as memory in our minds, and memories arise within the present moment. Experientially speaking, you are only ever here and you are only ever now. More so to this, coming to the recognition that this idea of being a temporary, finite, separate ego that sort of pilots and inhabits a physical body turns out to actually be something of an illusion. And the reality of the situation is that consciousness is the ever-present background substratum, the empty space in which all the appearances of the universe arise, including you. And at some point along the way, infinite universal consciousness played the role of you with your name and your narrative, your story, your history, even your hopes, your dreams and aspirations. Infinite consciousness playing as you became so lost and so involved in the character of you that it forgot its background, ever-present, eternal nature. Enlightenment and awakening is the true experienced recognition of this reality, not just as a concept, not as imagination, not as something that you think about, not as something that you just understand on a surface level, but something that you can confirm experientially, deep within your being, within your very heart. The problems of the day, the circumstances of the day, externally and internally, no matter what is going on in the external or internal world, coming to the recognition that all of this arises within the empty open space of infinite universal consciousness. Doesn't that sound great? Doesn't that sound amazing? Because furthermore to this, infinite universal consciousness is exactly that. The clue is in the title. It's infinite. It does not have finitude, meaning it never began and it will never end. Wow. Turns out you are immortal, but not you with your name and your history and your body. That part is not immortal. That part comes and goes. But the consciousness that is aware of this unfolding process of life will remain. And the more you establish in this, the more it simply becomes obvious. You start to realize, hang on, this was obvious the entire time. This was obvious all along. So coming to this recognition things start to change in your mind, because previously you were acting under the belief that you're a temporary, finite, vulnerable, fragile, separate self. No wonder you were so miserable. No wonder you were so anxious and depressed all of the time, whilst you were laboring under that previous belief, because it's also that belief gives rise to this frantic clawing at the world, trying to alter and change circumstances in order to be happy. But it turns out that happiness resided within you all along. What was needed was to turn inwards, not to turn outwards towards the external circumstances and try to change them, but to turn inwards and to recognize, fully embody the reality, the truth of existence. So, this is episode 15.5, because as we come to this recognition, the mind does not go willingly. And these old beliefs of being a separate self naturally are going to begin crumbling away. And as they begin to crumble and fade away, we're going to question what's happening, and rightly so. So, this is episode 15.5, because this phenomena, as the ego begins to drift and fall away, the other parts of the ego jump on, trying to analyze and interpret and form new beliefs and new opinions about what's happening. And one of the ways the ego tries to hold on is to create this sense of doubt, to create a confusion, to create logical ways that it can dismiss, discourage, dissuade, and ultimately try and put you off coming into the fullness of this recognition. Why it does this is probably the subject of an entire podcast in itself. Like, why does the ego hold on so much when actually what we're coming to the recognition of is what the ego wanted all along, which is happiness, peace, and fulfillment? That's going to be the subject of a completely different podcast. So as the ego falls away, it tries to hold on. And one of the ways that it tries to hold on is to try and convince you that you're just going nuts. Now, I did an entire podcast on the subject, and I recognized at the end of that podcast, I suddenly realized I hadn't covered one of the things I said I would cover, which is, isn't this just wishful thinking? Isn't this just toxic positivity? Now, I can't make an entire podcast out of that subject entirely, so that's why this is 15.5, a bonus episode. Let's get into this right now. So, this belongs to the category of questions that can be considered absolutely fair enough. I totally understand the questioning here is right, and it is just. It is a loving and compassionate thing to question anything, really. Like, questioning isn't a problem in itself. It's a good idea. It's like this the look before you leap sort of phenomena, because you don't want to just go on blind faith, because blind faith causes a lot of problems, and ultimately blind faith is not satisfying. In order to be truly fulfilled, we have to actually experience, we have to confirm it for ourselves, rather than believe something conceptually or just simply taking something on faith. So a lot of these questions that arise are absolutely fair enough, and they are a natural, healthy part of the process of a spiritual awakening. Blind faith won't cut it. And just taking somebody's word for it won't result in a happy, peaceful, stable life. In some ways, you just have to kind of work through some of these doubts, and hopefully that's what I can help you with a little bit here today. So, why would we consider finding the present moment and finding this spiritual awakening? Why would we consider this to be, isn't this just like a wishful thinking, or isn't this, maybe we might question, is this just too good to be true? I mean, what, all of my problems just don't exist? All of those problems that I was previously holding on to? Isn't that too good to be true? I mean, it's not true in my experience that my problems just disappear. They never really seem to go away. And isn't it too good to be true to think, well, can I be free of my anxiety? Can I be free of my depression? Can I actually be free of suffering? I mean, because of our experiences through life, and if we found the spiritual path, I'd be willing to bet you've probably suffered quite a great deal. I've suffered my entire life. How do I don't have any evidence to suggest that I can be free from this suffering. So when a proposed solution comes along and says, I have the solution to your suffering, naturally you're going to say, yeah, well, I've heard that before. Eh, After all, if you've been in pain and you're suffering, you've probably found or been looking for many different methods in order to alleviate that suffering, and nothing has worked because obviously nothing has worked. I would encourage you to try to come to the understanding that nothing has worked because you're trying to fix the ego. You're trying to fix the individual's, the sense of being an individual, temporary, finite narrative. You're trying to fix a character, and it can't be done. You can't fix a character. Instead, we need to come to the recognition and understanding the reality and truth of the situation, and that almost as a byproduct alleviates the suffering. A character, by its own definition, has to have troubles and strifes and problems. If we were to watch a movie playing out on the screen, it wouldn't be a very, well, it wouldn't be a movie. It wouldn't be a story unless the characters had conflicts and had troubles and had strifes and had things to overcome. This character that we all come to play, as an amazing poem from Postman goes, and now a great thing in the street seems any human nod, where move in strange democracy the million masks of God. And that's what each of us are, is one of these masks of God. So you are playing as this character and trying to fix this character, and that's why nothing has worked thus far. Coming to this point, coming to this recognition, oh, it's only ever the present moment, and I am actually infinite universal consciousness. It is a total solution. It is the end of suffering. It's the top of the mountain. It's the final gate, the final barrier to your liberation, to the end of this emotional turmoil and pain. But naturally, we're going to think, isn't this just too good to be true? You're probably quite disheartened from the trials and tribulations of life coming up to this point of constantly trying and failing to alleviate and fix suffering. But what's the harm in trying a new thing, right? So bring ourselves into this true present moment, finding the spiritual path and finding that actually it can be done. It can be done. But how can we truly come to this experiential understanding? Well, firstly, we have to understand that some things are delusional. And I've said it a few times, and it is something that I stand by, is that sometimes people do use spirituality as an excuse for laziness. It does happen, and it's worth recognizing that it does happen. There are the we can't avoid dealing with life, but we have to deal with life on life's terms. And sometimes I covered this in my episode on spiritual bypassing, but sometimes people do fall into the trap of simply trying to ignore their problems by just putting on a spiritual clothing, by putting on a spiritual coat of paint and just saying, oh, I don't have to worry about anything anymore because now I've found this spiritual path, and now I don't have to deal with all of the problems that I was previously dealing with. But we will see that what is actually happening here is that the ego is going into its avoidance mode. The ego avoids conflict, the ego avoiding pain. Maybe there are conflicts, situations, and circumstances that in the body, mind, practical, material world are going to require some effort and some energy in order to resolve. And it won't do to simply try and say, nothing actually exists, therefore I'm just going to completely ignore everything that happens in the practical and physical world because I'm above it now. It does happen. You do get this sometimes. It's a phenomena that happens in spirituality, but it it's good to discern whether this is happening with you or not. And I always believe everybody has this intuition, this small, quiet voice within that the heart will speak to you, and you will just know there's a certain flavor to it. There's a certain emotional resonance to it when you just know that actually I'm avoiding a problem here. This isn't my spiritual practice. This is me shying away from a certain conflict, from a certain situation, from a certain issue that actually, if I simply just put a small amount of effort and energy into it, I would resolve it no matter. It may be uncomfortable, but then it will be resolved. So I would say that this phenomena of it's sometimes referred to as spiritual bypassing does happen, but it's crucial to understand that this is not true awakening. True awakening is not a denial of reality, it is a recognition of reality. True awakening is experiencing the rawness and the intensity of life without the ego, without the ego getting in the way. And this often results actually in you taking a more proactive approach towards the various issues, struggles, and challenges in your life because the ego is no longer getting in the way, that is full of fear and full of desire. Without those things, without fear and desire in the way, you find a much more rational and reasonable approach to any conflict that arises, any problem that arises. And yes, I will say, so many of your problems that you previously thought you had turned out to be total illusions. Many, many, many problems that you believe you have are actually a construct of the ego. They are not real problems. And those problems do disappear. This can then feel like, wait, am I not just ignoring this problem? Let me just throw in some examples here of what would be a problem that's actually a problem of the ego and not a problem of reality. Whenever we have a problem that's relating to our worry, fear, or concern about how other people perceive us, that is ego. So this could be concerns about, let's say, your reputation, or about how you're seen, or about how in an interpersonal relationship, this concern about is my self-image the same image that other people see when they see me? That's ego. And this let's not discount the suffering that happens as a result of these egoic problems, because it results in enormous pain relating to things like our self image, our self worth, our self value, our self confidence. All of that, everything within that sphere turns out to just be an egoic problem because it's a fabrication and a construct of the mind. There is no way, no way that you can read other people's minds. And the ego is filled with paranoia and fear and doubt and turmoil relating to any time that we are concerned about the perception that is originating from other people. That is purely ego. And so when we come to this awakening, this feeling of actually coming to the experiential understanding, within enlightenment, all of those problems simply fall away. And you will just know it. You will just know that you're not ignoring a problem. Actually, you're simply recognizing that some of these problems were just an illusion. They were never there in the first place. Another very common example of what's actually an egoic problem and not a reality problem. Whenever we have doubts and fears of feeling like maybe we're not achieving enough in life, we haven't gotten, you should have been further in life by now. You look at things like your age and say, no, you compare. So comparison, the phrase compare and despair holds very true. You compare yourself to others, feel like you should be further in life, feel like you should have achieved more in life, feel like you're not living up to your potential, things of that nature. It turns out all of that can be totally dropped as well. it's it's something to perhaps you can use these markers, like things, these numbers like age. Honestly, people get so hung up on these numbers. They're just numbers. They're just numbers. It's a symbol. It's an illusion. We have so many people on planet Earth that have come to believe the menu is the meal. And we're so focused on the symbols, we are so focused on the image, that we have completely forgotten the juice of life, that the symbol, the image, represents something, but it is not the thing itself. That is crucial to understand. You could imagine a table full of people who sit down, read the menu, and say, oh, that all sounds lovely, and then start trying to eat the menu. That's not how life works. But that is what so many people are doing when you're laying awake in bed at night, fretting and worrying about, oh, my age, about my salary, about these numbers, and about all of these images of, oh, who I want to be and who I should be in life, and the life I'd like to live, and what's it going to look like, and everything like that. That's the menu. You're sat worrying about the menu, thinking it's someday you're going to eat the menu. We got to eat the meal. We got to eat the meal, and the meal happens now. Your life is happening now. Your life is happening in the present moment. Your life doesn't happen in the future. Your life didn't happen in the past. Your life is happening now. So, yes, some of these so-called problems simply up and vanish when you come to this awakening. Now, as they vanish, we will say, and you probably may have felt this as I was just talking, but hang on, if I don't have this aspiration, if I don't have this drive, if I don't have this motivation, am I not falling into a trap of just, because am I not just avoiding the pain of aspiration? Because it can be painful. It costs energy. It costs effort. If by avoiding the pain of the aspiration, will I not just stagnate in life and get to the end of my life and say that I didn't achieve enough, that I should have been more aspirational, I should have been more motivated, I didn't achieve what I set out to achieve? That's a very common fear. People fear that they're going to get to the end of their life and say, I should have achieved more. But everyone who reaches the end of their life, this is universal, everyone who reaches the end of their life never says that. They never, ever, ever on their deathbed say, I should have put more work into my career. Nobody ever says it. What people say is that I should have appreciated life while I had it. That's what people say at the end of their life. I should have lived in the moment. I should have had more experiences. I should have spent more time with my loved ones. I should have spent more time doing the things I enjoy, and I should have spent less time working. And this is universal. Everyone says this at the end of their life. I should have enjoyed life as it is. And I don't know why I was so stressed and I was so worried my whole life, only to realize the whole thing was completely ridiculous. That it's so common, and you find many people towards the end of their life just have this recognition. They get over the finish line and retire. This happens all the time. People finally do it. They finally retire. They finally get their handshake and their golden watch and all of that thing and their pension. They look back at their career and go, what was that all about? Like, what? Hang on, I've just spent my entire life, often working to make somebody else rich. I spent my entire life putting all of that in, and I just feel the same way that I've always felt. Why does that phenomena happen? I'll tell you why that phenomena always happens, because it's only ever the present moment. There's no such thing as age. There's no such thing. No years have ever passed. Ever. Not a single second of time has ever actually passed. Ever. It has never happened. There has never been a second. There's no such thing as years. So, this framework that we build up in our mind, partly we do it to ourselves and partly we're conditioned into believing it, because you're being controlled, by the way. So you're partly conditioned to believe in this thing called time, and we partly do it to ourselves, perhaps because of the way our minds naturally work. And so we have all of these false markers in our mind for an illusory future in which you imagine you're going to feel fulfilled. So you think, well, when I finally get to 65 and retire, I'll have this huge body of work I can look back on and feel fulfilled. You think this is going to happen automatically. You get over that finish line and go, nope, that wasn't it either. And I just wasted the last 65 years living somebody else's version of what happiness is. Right? What if we could come to that recognition early? What if we don't have to make that mistake and instead bring ourselves fully into this present moment? Now, this does not mean, so I'm going to bring this back to the ego's tendency to avoid. This does not mean that you can get out of doing your work, right? Everybody comes to this world with a certain amount of work to do. But I have good news right here, and that good news is the work that you should be doing should align with your heart and not with your head. The work that you should do should be coming from a place of love and an expression of your natural skills, talents, and abilities to do what you are called to do what you arrived here to do what excites you, to do what brings you joy, to do what brings you love and allows you to express that joy, happiness, and love. Not what somebody else told you is the right thing to do. So, this idea of, well, if I find enlightenment and bring myself into the present moment entirely, and I really do this, I really drop the ego, will I not give up on my career? Will I not achieve my potential? And in a lot of ways, we think, am I not just being selfish by doing this? Because don't I need to chip in with all of the work? Well, let's look at what happens when you do fully get into a more awakened state, is that you start actually becoming more productive. You actually start putting more energy, time, and effort into what naturally aligns with your skills, talents, and abilities. And doesn't that sound more productive? Doesn't that sound less selfish? You think about the greatest artists and the musicians and the joy and what they bring to the world. And now this is an interesting, deep, and nuanced point, right? It may actually be that your skills, talents, and abilities, your natural inclination, and your natural temperament actually is that you're very good at working a 9 to 5 office job. That could be, if that truly is your calling, if you're very good at something, perhaps you are very good analytically, you're good at data and numbers, and you're not particularly inclined towards maybe physical activity as such. That's just your natural temperament and inclination. You're actually quite fulfilled and happy to sit at a desk and you'd get some sense of satisfaction out of crunching these numbers, and you're appreciated at work, and you do quite well because you're good at your job. Now, and now this again, this is quite nuanced. So there are some stresses and strains that come along with that, absolutely. And you might fear that, well, but if I use the present moment as a way to overcome these work stresses and strains, won't I also be giving up what I love to do? Won't I also be giving up my job? It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that. It will alleviate all of the worries, stresses, and strains of the office politics and all of that garbage. And instead, you'll be able to focus entirely on the work, on actually what you are there to do. And you will feel that sense of satisfaction and fulfillment grow. All that will happen is you won't be getting involved in all of the nonsense that comes around it. You won't be involved in the gossip anymore, any of the dramas, any of the office nonsense. You'll simply be able to focus on your work and enjoy your work. It could also be that you suddenly realize, actually, no, I don't like this job at all. It's not my natural inclination. I really don't enjoy it. I should be doing something else. I wanted to be a surf instructor. You'll remember, you go, hang on a minute, when I was 14, I decided I'm going to instruct people on how to surf. At what point did I get so lost that I am now working in a paper merchant in Slough, and I'm crunching numbers for people that don't appreciate me, that don't validate me, that don't respect me, and I'm not living the life that I could be living. Finding a spiritual awakening can go exactly like that, and you go, oh, hang on a minute, I should be out being a surf instructor, and so you will get up, walk out of that job, and go and do that. So, certain problems do completely disappear when you come to this awakening and you come to this understanding. But in my experience, what I found happening is that many of the problems that I thought I had disappeared, and what I was left with was my actual problems. So, for example, in my previous way of living, I was an alcoholic, severely unhealthy. I was type 2 obese. It only goes up to type 3, and I was type 2 obese. I was depressed. I was anxious. I had terrible relationships with absolutely everyone. I caused havoc, misery, suffering, and unease around a lot of people. I wasn't there. There was also, I was still me, so there was still some, I wasn't totally terrible, but I did have a lot of issues and a lot of problems. But the problems I was walking around with in my head, I had this idea that my main problem is that we live in a capitalist consumer society, and I am the only one on earth who can fix all of these problems. And I looked out at the world and I said, it's everyone else that has the problems, and I need to fix those problems. And I was fully invested in my academic studies and things. And I just considered myself incredibly important, and I'm the one who needs to fix a lot of these problems, and I have the solution and answers to everything. And when I woke up, when I finally started to decide, actually, the game is worth the candle, and my life isn't working, my life isn't functioning, and I was rapidly on the path to total self-destruction. When I finally started to wake up and do my meditation and start to transform and change my body and mind, I woke up to the reality of the problems that I actually had, not the illusory pretend problems that I was hiding within. So I used to hide, my ego hid in these bigger, loftier problems that I could not possibly solve. There is no way on earth that I was qualified or had the power to change. Not a chance. But ego loves to get involved with those problems because it's a playground that it can run around in forever, trying to fix the world and enjoying the self aggrandizing sense of self importance that trying to quote unquote fix those problems creates. As I woke up to the reality of the situation, I realized all of those problems that I was dealing with, well, maybe there are these problems in the world, but unfortunately, I'm not the guy to fix them. And as I woke up and came to finally finding some sense of inner peace, I started to look at the things in my life that were actually causing me stress and misery. And I started to realize, hang on, my problem in life isn't this capitalist consumer society that we live in. The problem in my life is the 20 cans of strong cider that I'm drinking every day. Maybe, maybe that is a bigger problem in my life than the political state of the world. Those problems still exist out there, but until I've sorted out this alcoholism, I'm not going to be any good to anyone. So it was the awakening that actually facilitated a more practical and proactive approach to life than my previous mentality, which was the normal way of looking at the world, the ego identified way of the world, that turned out to be actually delusional. It was my previous way of looking at the world that was delusional, not the awakened state of mind that is delusional. And this is a crucial point to come to understand. It's that the ego identity is the delusion. It's the ego identity that creates all of the problems of wishful thinking, toxic positivity, all of that, and avoiding the actual problems. So for me, the actual problems in my life were my alcoholism, were my obesity, were my anxiety, were my depression, and the fact that my mind was completely all jammed up and all wrong, the way that I was perceiving people and the way that I was perceiving the world. That was the actual problem. So finding the present moment and finding awakening was not wishful thinking. It was not just trying to put a positive spin on everything. It was a deep recognition of life, the reality of life. I was no longer avoiding my problems because in the present moment, there's no way of avoiding your problems. There's no way. The ego avoids the problems. The ego places layers and layers of defenses, delusions, images, fantasies, misremembering the past, misinterpreting the present, and fantasizing about an illusory future. That is all ego and mind activity. And all of those things will mask the real problems that you actually have. But if you bring yourself fully into the present moment, there is no getting away from the actual problems that you have because you keep finding yourself almost there at peace. And then there's one or two things that do genuinely form a psychological barrier to you truly coming to this recognition. There's no way that I could have found a true awakening whilst I was still addicted, so the addiction had to go. And the awakening into the present moment has done nothing but help me to lose the weight and maintain a healthy lifestyle. Why? Because remaining within the present moment, by coming truly to the recognition of the infinite universal consciousness, delusion cannot stand. There can be no room for delusion because you are opening your mind to the true reality of now. And we can do this right now. Just do it right now. Just fully bring yourself into this present moment and ask yourself which of the problems, you've probably got a whole list of them, a whole A3 list of life problems. Bring yourself into the full, true present moment right here, right now, and ask yourself which problems are present now, in this moment. The vast majority of them, many of them simply won't exist. The vast majority of them can at least be sort of shelved and put on the later base, like not a big issue actually right now. But the ones that are currently existing in the here and now are most likely the ones that you have been avoiding dealing with your entire life. So, this is my main point and my main true total defense against the idea that spiritual awakening is just avoiding your problems. It's that actually the opposite is true. Coming to your spiritual awakening, you come face to face with your actual problems, not your imagined illusory problems. And often, often, they are so mundane. These problems are so mundane and with such a simple solution, it will stun you. It turns out actually that, and I found this, look, there's no judgment at all because there is no way anyone will ever be in a worse state than I was in mentally, physically. I was awful. Okay. So it's no judgment at all on anyone because I have been there. I've made every mistake under the sun. It's taken me forever to finally sort my life out. But hey, I guess we're kind of getting there. So there's no judgment at all. But please understand that actually the root cause of your problems is often far more mundane and with a far more simple solution than you could possibly imagine. Because I realized, oh, my alcoholism was being caused by the fact that I drank, right? Isn't that so obvious? Isn't that so obvious within the present moment? Now, I learned AVRT as the technique to facilitate a deeper understanding, but ultimately, oh, if I stop drinking, I'm not an alcoholic. Now, how on earth could that be wishful thinking? How on earth could that be toxic positivity? How on earth could that be too good to be true? If I want to stop drinking, I need to stop drinking. Isn't that the most logical? Isn't that the most rational thing that you could possibly understand? So how can this be delusion? It's the raw reality of life itself that you are coming to grips with. It can't be delusional. That's my main point. It's reality itself that you're experiencing. And once you begin this, there's this sense of excitement. Oh, I'm in control, actually, of many of these issues. I realized, well, hang on a minute. If I go for a run every day and I eat healthy, I'll lose weight. And my ego goes, yeah, but what about this? What about that? What about this? But I realized, no, that's the ego. That's not me. That's not the, if I just keep behaving in this way, then that's me, then, isn't it? I am what I do. I am what I am. The ego goes, yeah, but you've never done it before. You've always been like this. You can't stop drinking. You can't stop. You'll always be overweight. It's genetic. You've inherited and blah 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 blah, and all of this interminable mind chatter. Coming into the reality of the present moment, all of that mind chatter completely disappears, and you are free to enjoy the full expression of life. It's easy to go out for a run because I enjoy it. It's easy to eat healthy because I enjoy it. I know the benefits that will arise from it. I'm no longer seeking the quick hit of the sugar and the salt and the carbs. No longer seeking that hit because I don't need it. Because as infinite universal consciousness, I am already fulfilled. I am already happy. I am existing in a place of peace, and I do no longer require these unhelpful, toxic, horrible things to consume in order to try and facilitate that peace. That peace is already there. It always was. Always. That's the reality of the situation. Now, it is worth noting that simple doesn't mean easy. I had 28 years of bad habits with their momentum, with their ferocity, with their fierceness of energy and intensity that continued to assault me with a barrage You can't recover from alcohol. I get it to this day, but externally now, I get it through YouTube comments. You can't recover from alcoholism. It's a disease, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sure. Okay. So I had all of this momentum. The egoic voice, the addictive voice did come. It kept on coming. But once I was fully established in the true awakening, you realize that this voice can't touch you. It can't come anywhere near you. Said it before, goblins don't attack angels. They can't. They don't have the means. So it's like that, essentially. But this in itself is the defense against the concept that spiritual awakening is just toxic positivity or wishful thinking or too good to be true thinking, because it's hard, right? And anytime something is hard, you're paying the price. You're sacrificing. So in order to stop drinking, I had to sacrifice the pleasure of drinking, right? Okay. So often people say you can't just stop drinking. That's too good to be true. However, think about the sacrifice. Life, ultimately, reality is fair. Anything you're willing to pay the price for, you will have. I'm going to say that again. And if you've got a notepad, write this one down. Anything that you are willing to pay the price for, you will have. To stop drinking, I had to sacrifice the pleasure that alcohol gave me. And I cannot deny I used to love drinking. It was my favorite thing to do. I don't even know why, but it really did something for me. And I used to absolutely love the high that alcohol gave me. It almost killed me. It very, very nearly killed me, and it completely destroyed my health and my life. And so I stopped. And in doing so, I had to sacrifice that pleasure. Now, sacrificing pleasure is not a too good to be true sort of thing. You have to sacrifice it. And ultimately, turns out it's a bargain, right? It's a real bargain. I'm so happy to have sacrificed that and given that up for the benefits that it's given me. What are the benefits that it's given me? Health, happiness, joy, love, a healthy social life, healthy romantic relationships, a proper professional life in which I am fulfilled and happy, and ultimately the greatest gift of all, inner peace. Inner peace. And that is worth all the sacrifice in the world. There is a reason so many religious traditions and spiritualities speak of sacrifice. Sacrifice. And so sacrifice is the ultimate defense, it should be, in your mind. If you start to feel like, yeah, but this present moment thing, isn't it just wishful thinking? Is it not just too good to be true? Is this not toxic positivity? Just understand, just take a look at what you're giving up. When you give up the ego, you also give up a lot of the fantasies and projections you had about your life. You can no longer blame the external world for anything. That's a hard one to hear, I know. You can know, but the trade-off, so everything's trade-off, everything's balanced, and everything is sacrificed. You no longer blame the external world for things. You also no longer blame yourself for things. You don't beat yourself up so much. By relinquishing your blame of the external world, you also give yourself a bit of a break. You don't fall into this trap of going, oh, I'm no good, I can't do it. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this and do that. You don't have the luxury of that anymore. Why do I say you don't have the luxury of that anymore? Because it's a defense mechanism. If you go out into the world and say, oh, I'm so down on myself, I have such low confidence and such low self-esteem, everyone's going to not expect so much of you, right? It's a tactic. It's a strategy to live in life. And it's a tactic and a strategy that's very effective, but often people start that strategy and tactic when they're young and they forget that it was a strategy and a tactic, right? Again, nuanced point here, but it's absolutely crucial to understand your low self esteem, your low self confidence, your low self worth could potentially actually be a defense mechanism that you use in order to hide, and so that other people won't expect too much of you, and that other people won't ask you to do so much, right? And that in some ways it's a defense mechanism because you feel you're keeping your head below the trenches and you won't draw fire because you're trying to demonstrate that you're not arrogant. I'm not arrogant because look how low my self-esteem is. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but that's a crucial one because often we put our armor on, forget we're wearing our armor, forget to take it off, and then we wonder why we feel so heavy all of the time. Okay? Take the armor off. Okay, let's just experience the raw reality of life. And that's why this can't be wishful thinking. It can't be delusional. It can't be toxic positivity because of what we sacrifice. We sacrifice all of our defense mechanisms. We sacrifice our fantasies. We fantasize our projections about the world. And there is a cost. The cost of awakening is that you no longer get to stay asleep, right? That's the cost. That's the cost of spiritual awakening, is that you have to awaken. The sacrifice is also what we're trying to achieve. The sacrifice is the peace, is the joy, it is the love. Because in order to love fully, we have to accept fully others and ourselves, and that's hard. That's hard. It's hard work. It's hard work to love. It's easier to hate. It's easier to be angry. These are simple emotions. They're raw emotions. They're simple. They're easy. They don't require sacrifice. It's easy to be afraid. It's easy to be angry. It's easy to be hateful. It is hard to love. It is hard to be compassionate. It is hard to be patient. It is hard to be kind. It is hard to slow down. It is hard to accept because we're dealing with the habits of a lifetime, and it's hard to start turning that around. But when something is hard, you are paying the price for it. And when you pay the price for something, it's fair. You hand over the money, you get the goods. And in this case, you're handing over your ego. I hand it over to the universe. Hand it to God. Whatever the terminology you want to use, I hand my ego to the angels. I hand over my delusions to the energy of the universe and say, thank you, ego. Your services are no longer required. Thanks for everything. You kept me safe. You kept me well. You gave me energy at times. But this whole fabrication, this whole construction, I'm seeing now that actually my ego is in charge of me when I should be in charge of it. And I'm sorry, ego, but this no longer works for me. I've got to hand you over to the universe. And it's a very old, well-worn set of clothes that I it's time to take it off and put it away. And that's the sacrifice. That is the price that you pay in order to awaken. And you find underneath that sacrifice, you find the joy, the fulfillment, and the love that you were always seeking whilst you were still clothed in ego. But you find that it was in you all along. So yes, the reason we have to give up that sort of aspiration, and you do have, this is a part of the price that you pay. You can't hide in an illusory future anymore. In an illusory future, oh, everything's going to be fine in the future. Now you're faced with the raw reality. No, there's no such thing as the future. It's always going to be now, and you'll always only ever have to deal with now, but you'll also have to face the now as well. You have to face it. You can't clothe it in ego. You can't clothe it in delusion and fantasy. You have to face the reality of what's happening in this moment. So the reason we have to then start to give up some of these aspirations, we have to give up some of the egoic goals in favor of now aligning ourselves with our true heart purpose, our true intuitive goals. In giving up that aspiration, that's the sacrifice, that's the price that you pay. So, is finding the present moment just not me ignoring my problems? Well, I suppose the answer truly is that you are ignoring the illusory problems. But what happens when you ignore an illusion? The same thing that happens when you turn the TV off. The movie is over. There was never a movie in the first place. The screen remains. The potential of an infinite number of movies remains. Any movie could come on that screen next, but for now you've turned it off. There's no movie. There never was a movie. It's a story. It's a fabrication. It's a myth. And so by turning it off, all of those problems that you thought were there are gone. And now you're faced with actually reality. Reality itself. When we come to our awakening, when we come to our enlightenment, the truth, not your truth, the truth becomes painfully apparent. Remember, when we feel pain, that's a signal that something needs to be addressed. That's what pain is. When you feel that pain, now we address the problem itself instead of trying to find a way around it. No more delusion, no more trying to interpret things in a different way. You simply realize, so in my case, I can only ever speak to my experience, my understanding. You may have different problems. You may have a complete suite of different issues and problems. Absolutely. But I'm going to speak to mine because mine are also incredibly common problems that people have in life: addiction, obesity, anxiety, depression, recovering from emotional abuse, recovering from PTSD, recovering from past trauma, all of those sorts of things. It was only when my delusional egoic state of mind dropped that I could begin to face those issues. And they had a very mundane solution to them. I needed to lose weight, so I started running and eating healthy. It is the ego that makes it sound complicated. It's not. It's simple. It's hard, yes, but it's simple. To stop drinking, I stopped drinking. I used AVRT, addictive voice recognition technique, however, perfectly simple. Very, very simple. Very hard, but very simple. In order to recover from anxiety and depression, I went to the doctor and I said, I suffer from anxiety and depression. What should I do? They put me in touch with the cognitive behavioral therapist. I went to go to those sessions, and that started my journey of learning into meditative practice and understanding my own thought patterns, my own thought behaviors. The exercise also helped me with the anxiety and depression, because obviously it does. Obviously it does. You feel good when you exercise and you don't feel anxious, you don't feel depressed when you're exercising. It has all kinds of natural effects and benefits. Nothing that I'm suggesting is all totally out there, all crazy, all delusional, all toxic positivity. There's none of that. None of that. They were simple problems that had a simple solution. So it is not ignoring your problems to come into the present moment. I mean, strangely enough, actually, coming into the present moment, it goes a very, very long way to solving your anxiety, because how can you be worried about a future that simply doesn't exist? It's just not possible. It goes a long way to helping you with your depression, because you're no longer underneath the heavy cloud of thoughts and feelings, but instead you become the sunlight that shines on the top of those heavy thoughts and feelings. Those heavy thoughts and feelings are still there, and the heaviness in the body is still there, but now you are the infinite universal consciousness that is aware of that depression, and you are not immersed in it. As to the subject specifically of toxic positivity, which I very begrudgingly admit is a real thing, because there's this horrible trend recently of just putting the word toxic in front of anything in order to discredit it. You can just put toxic in front of something and it completely dismisses the point that somebody's trying to make. However, I will recognize that there is a phenomena of toxic positivity. It is the scenario. I don't know if you've ever had this, where you've got a problem at work or something. You've had a really tough day, or you've got a real problem. Maybe you've got a health problem. Maybe you've got an issue at work. Maybe there's a serious issue that does require some help, and you go to somebody in your support network, somebody that you trust, somebody that you confide in, and you say, look, I've got this issue. And they respond with, well, some of it's just about your mindset, isn't it, really? And a lot of it's just about looking at things in a more positive way. And maybe we just need to sort of like get on with things. That is toxic positivity. It's when people dismiss. There is a tendency for people with a certain mindset of, let's just think about things in a positive way. And it's a corruption of positivity. It's a corruption of optimism, and it's a corruption of hope. That's what evil is. Evil is a corruption. It's a perversion of the natural order. Hope and optimism are beautiful, wonderful, natural, healthy, normal things. Sometimes it gets co-opted. Sometimes it gets corrupted, and people take a hold of it and take on this attitude of, if we just think positively, then we'll fix everything and we'll solve absolutely everything. All you need to do is think more positively. That dismisses, devalues, diminishes, and invalidates somebody's real life issues. However, I will add, there was a time in my early years of transforming, as I was hitting the gym every day, hitting my running, hitting everything, doing all of the things that I needed to do in order to recover. There was a time that I did adopt a mentality of ultra positivity that could probably be looked at and assessed as, yeah, that was probably going into toxic positivity. However, a lot of these maladaptive structures and mindsets and mind patterns are temporary frameworks that will take us to where we need to go. It was being ultra positive about everything is definitely a step above being ultra negative about everything. And people are quick to label toxic positivity, but what about toxic negativity? I'm sure you can think of a few people in your life that fall into that category, the category of toxic negativity, because Lord knows there's plenty more of them than the people who are in the toxic positivity mindset. So I would just be very careful with that label of toxic positivity, because actually a positive mindset, even though I was unbalanced at one point, the unbalance of, well, if I just go 100% effort, energy, positivity into things, that's going to fix my entire life. There was a time I thought exercise would totally fix all of my mental health problems. Turns out it fixed all of my physical problems and went a long way to fixing my mental health problems, but wasn't the root cause. And that's where I come into the recovery from PTSD and past emotional abuse. It took a lot more therapy, recognition, understanding, and meditation in order to heal those previous wounds. And those previous wounds can then heal over, and the scar remains and will probably remain for the rest of my life, but the wound no longer festers and is no longer dangerous. But toxic positivity does exist. It is a real thing. Wishful thinking, or even magical thinking, does exist. It is a real thing. But use your intuition and just ask yourself, is what I'm doing toxic positivity? Is what I'm doing actually wishful thinking? And your intuition will steer you in the right direction. You're saying, well, no, actually, because I'm experiencing the peace of being. I'm experiencing the happiness of this awakening. And nobody can deny your experience. Nobody can deny your happiness. If you're feeling it, then you're feeling it. That can't be delusion because you're feeling it. It's real in your experience. It's the reality of your experience. So you can always just bring yourself back to the present moment and ask yourself on a deep level through your intuition, your heart, not your head, is this just too good to be true thinking? Well, not really, because I have to deal with all of my practical problems in life. Dealing with all my practical problems in life can't be delusion. It just makes sense. You find a lot of detractors from the sort of spiritual path are often that sort of heavily scientifically minded. And they're like, no, we need to be practical. We need to face the facts. But this is facing the facts. This is practical. Just remove the mind from the situation, and what are you left with? Reality. What is more practical than reality itself? I mean, it could not be more simple. It could not be more simple. There is nothing more practical than reality itself. The true delusion are these people running around stressed out of their minds, frantic. And this is a common, normal insanity that everybody's fallen into. People are so consumed by their ego that they focus entirely on illusory fabrications and lose sight of what's actually important. They become so focused on their career that they neglect to provide adequate emotional care for their children. Now that is insanity. There is no excuse. That is total delusion. Both parents focused so heavily on egoic things that they neglect their children. Perhaps you get people who are so focused on the cause that they have devoted their life to. You get this in social causes, perhaps it's even in religious causes, so many different causes, crusades that people go on, that they neglect to realize that one of their friends is suffering. Their closest friend could be suffering terrible mental health. Terrible mental health. One of your closest, oldest friends. But you're so focused on this external moral crusade that you don't realize that the people within your actual sphere of influence are being neglected. Now that is the delusion. That is the ego. That is the wishful thinking. To think that you don't have to put the work into the more immediate issues of the day. That's where the work should go. That's where the effort should go. That's where the love and compassion should go. Into the daily interactions, the daily work, the minutes and hours that you pour into your words, your thoughts, your work, your behavior. That's where the effort and work should go. But if you're lost in an imaginary thought stream, consumed by this idea of who you think you should be, of where you're going to go in the future, of all of these numbers on the screen, you are eating the menu and you are not experiencing the fullness of the meal. Tragically common. Nothing less than tragic. So, wishful thinking or too good to be true? No, actually. I think what's wishful thinking and what's too good to be true is this delusional belief that you can control the world. I think that's the too good to be true thing. To think that you, as an individual, temporary, finite, separate self, can control, manipulate the world around you to conform into an image that will fulfill you. That you can force life into a pattern that will make you happy. That is the too good to be true. That is the magical thinking. That is the toxic positivity. To try and force the external world to take a shape that will make you happy. That is the delusion. If instead we can turn around and instead go inwards to a place of acceptance, to a place of reality, full presence, full awakening, no more ego, no more projection, no more fantasizing, just what is today in the here and now, as the consciousness behind it all, the open, empty, spacious substratum that exists, aware of everything, but not subject to everything. If we can exist as that, we find ourselves in reality, the truth of the universe. And it can be painful. It can be tough. There are sacrifices involved. You have to let go of your illusion of control. And letting go of the illusion of control is terrifying. Terrifying. It's terrifying to come to the recognition that nobody knows what they're doing. It's terrifying. It's painful. There's an existential dread to the whole thing. You realize, oh, my parents are just human beings as well. They don't know what they're doing. My kids are, they're just human beings too. My kids have their own will. My kids have their own ideas and beliefs and opinions, and I'm not really in control of what my children do at all. I can try to guide them, but I mean, they're just bananas. They've got their own personalities, their own lives. It's like you have to let go of control. You want to control them because you want to keep them safe, but you have to let them go. That's terrifying. You have to let go of the idea that if you just work hard enough, you'll be recognized for it at work, and one day you're going to get your time in the sun. It might never happen. You might work your entire life and never be recognized. That's hard. That's hard to accept. It's hard to accept that you might not get the thing that you've set out to get. That could be the career, it could be the money, it could be the husband or wife, it could be the kids, it could be whatever your image is. It's hard to accept that might not happen. It's hard to accept that. But in that acceptance lies your liberation. In that acceptance lies your freedom. Accepting, oh, I'm not in control after all. How could that be wishful thinking? I am not in control. There is nothing too good to be true about that. I can't control anything, and actually I need to let go of everything. Then I am in some semblance of control of my inner peace by letting go. If my career goes well, that's great. If it doesn't go well, that's great. If I don't heal this relationship, that's great. If I do heal this relationship, that's great. But ultimately, the space I reside is the kingdom of heaven. Peace, serenity, openness, and joy, the screen that observes. And the best that I can do in life is spread peace, love, happiness, and joy. The best I can do is take care of the ship, and the weather will blow it whichever way it blows it. I will aim for a certain direction, but come what may. The storm is going to roll in, the acceptance. This storm is going to roll in. It will blow me off course. That is okay. I accept all. In the acceptance even of our pain, our emotional pain, our physical pain, there is nothing delusional about accepting pain. There are some pains that I can fix and I'll fix them. There are other pains I cannot fix, and so I will accept them. That is all. That is all. That is life. The worldly hopes one sets their hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and like snow upon the desert's dusty face, alights a little hour or two, and then is gone. See if today you can experience the rawness of life, the intensity of life. Open yourself to the emotions of the reality of now, right here, right now, and ask yourself, is this just too good to be true? Because you will see that in the same way that if the meal is overly sweet with no salt in it at all, it's not very nice. If it's just salt with no sweetness, it's not very nice either. But there's a balance of the two. And life as it is in the present moment is likely to contain both pleasant circumstances and unpleasant circumstances. But both together, that's the meal. Let's put the menu in the bin and let's see what we're dealing with on our plate right here. So wishful thinking, too good to be true, toxic positivity and delusion, absolutely not. For all our thought of what, for all our fear of how, you're only ever here, and it's only ever now. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I cannot tell you how happy I am to see that people are resonating with some of this. Some of the episodes are doing better than I ever thought possible and imaginable. So thank you, particularly if you've listened thus far. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. It's very heartening, because, well, for many years I've been searching for some kind of platform. And maybe we're getting there. I'll keep building this platform. I know there's things to work on. As always, I know there's things that need fixing and tweaking and everything. For one thing, I'm sorry about the adverts on my meditations. I'm struggling to find a solution to this, but we'll get there. Big things still planned. I've got the time, but I don't have the energy at the minute. So I'm just trying to work through as much as I can, but I will get to writing. I've got a book in the works. I've got a blog in the works. I've got new meditations in the works. It's all coming. I've got plenty more episodes coming up. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It does make a massive difference to my stats, my numbers. I need to grow this platform in order to make this viable as a way forwards for me. So please hit that like and subscribe. Sorry to beg, but there it is, right? You can find me on Instagram, Corin_Bryant_. You can connect with me there if you want to send me a message, ask me any questions. Feel free to do so on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, Corin Bryant, meditation coach and personal trainer. If you follow me on Spotify, please follow me on YouTube. You can find me as Corin Bryant. If you follow me on YouTube, please find me on Spotify as The Power of Now What, Overcoming Awakening Problems. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for listening. I cannot tell you how validating it is. Take care, be well, and stay present.